right, so today we're going to talk about primary workloads, and we're also going to try to react to all the chats that come up because that was fun last time. First thing we wanted to acknowledge is that Anthony and Patrick did such a great job last time that we felt like we had to up our game, but they also said that they didn't have a special effects budget. So we've decided that we are going to have a special effects budget. So Dust, you want to show us what you got?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So we are doing the 8-bit edition of primary workloads. So just so you know, your internet is not failing. It's not my Starlink account. That's pixelated on purpose. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So you already saw part 1 from Anthony and Patrick. This is part 2. A couple of things. Dream environment, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's probably better to be called an ideal environment, but as we'll talk later, marketing matters, right? Really what we're trying to do here is give you guys an idea of how Eagle vets products and why we're a little bit different in the sense that we don't sell every product under the sun. We spend a lot of time trying to wade through the architecture and outcomes-based marketing and all the fluff and try to figure out what delivers actual value. So that's what we're going to do today. So, here's our design philosophy. It goes into everything we do. Doesn't matter if it's storage or security products, whatever it is. And so I'll rattle through this pretty quick. But, the first thing is if we really are a partner, we like to call you guys our extended family. We should push back when we think there's maybe a better way to approach something. Ultimately, you're the customer. You're always right. You can tell us to shut up, but that's kind of our job. So if, you working with a VAR that's like, yeah, yes, man, maybe you're not working with the right VAR, right? In terms of our prime directives, security and recoverability are key. We're going to bang on this a couple of times, but simplicity over complexity. The data center is kind of like an onion, and every time you add a widget or a feature, that's another layer you got to peel back when you're trying to solve a problem. Dustin's going to talk about quality of support. And we just wanted to mention one other thing, that it's really easy in IT with a bunch of nerds like me, that it's easy to chase shiny toys. So we put a lot of weight behind maturity and longevity. But if you remember how we were the first adopters for EqualLogic or Nimble, we do adopt new and transformative products, but they have to be transformative. They have to offer something that you can't get anywhere else. And then finally, where we put the rubber to the road is we vet any product we bring to the customer for 6 to 12 months. So that's super important to us. So why don't we get in and start talking about this stuff? All right. So something that we struggle with our vendors, and of course you guys can struggle with too, is what we call marketecture or outcomes-based marketing. It's basically the fact that these marketing powerhouses by these big vendors, they do such a great job at promoting their strongest abilities and hiding their weaknesses. And I always like to joke that I used to have a real job at one point, but back in 2012, my favorite thing to say is I want to buy the last product that was presented to me. That's because they all did such a great job, right? So what we try to do at Eagle is we try to use our marketing decoder ring and we try to break down what's really important so we can kind of focus when we go through this due diligence, what really matters. So Dustin, next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today, what really matters are data services and features. We're kind of in an era of checkboxes, but you really need to stop and look and see if they work well. Also, shiny toy syndrome, are the features really cool, but do they actually benefit the customer? Another thing that we're always trying to combat is over-engineering that leaves you stuck with complexity. And I'm going to give an example of that with hyper-converged infrastructure. And then once again, Dustin's going to talk about support and intelligence. Is it proactive? Does it apply machine learning? Is it actually adding value when what hits the fan? So before I make fun of hyperconverged infrastructure, I just want to add that HCI has a place in the data center. We sell HCI. There are some really good fits for it, but it's also a great example of marketecture, right? The product came later. The marketing powerhouses, drew off of everything they'd earned in the past. And if you go to the next slide, Dustin, you'll see what I'm talking about. If you look at an HCI Priso, they do everything they can to not talk about the architecture, right? It's all high level. They talk about outcomes, right? So this is a really easy way to try to sell something to somebody. Hey, I know the 7 things that are the biggest pain in your data center, and I solve them all. Where do you sign? So it makes these products really alluring, and we have to speak to this a lot. And to give you an idea what we're talking about, we actually give a presentation just on HCI, and this is one slide out of that. You've probably seen it before. I've often talked for an hour just on this slide. But the takeaway is that when you look at HCI and you get past the marketing, a lot of their data services, the snapshots, the data reduction, the TCO, scale, encryption, they're all actually pretty mediocre when you compare them against other products, like maybe a tier one SAN. So what you have to ask yourself ultimately is, what is it really transformative at? And do you want that benefit so badly that you'll work with all of these challenges? That makes sense?
Makes sense. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, you're right. With HCI, it really lacks in the data services space. So, we'll go a little bit deeper into, since we talked to all the vendors and all these storage product vendors, we understand a little bit more about how data services work across the storage and where we find more value. So, for example, with caching and tiering, if Flash isn't in your budget, right, we might recommend you go with the caching solution based platform over something that does tiering, right? It's not going to give you, if you want to save that money but still get the value, that's an area where you can maybe cut and save and still gain. Brian's going to talk a lot about snapshots and protected snapshots later, so I won't go too much into those, but we love talking about them, and they're very important. So, but all these things are important, right? Like we do this analysis, we understand all these different pieces and how they attribute to a strong storage platform. Like, for example, the third-party integrations, we put a lot of weight into that. We want your backup solution to be tied to your primary storage solution for them to work seamlessly together, or for you to have VMware level access into your storage platform. But probably the biggest component that we see a lot of value in is in that analytics space, right? Things that make your job easier, that make things more seamless, that just give you better intelligence. So like Brian said, or like it says down below, so don't allow those vendors to turn these back into just check boxes, right? Like you got to look at the details, and we do that. So if you have questions, you can always ask us, but yeah, pay attention to those details. Now for the analytics, analytics intelligence really got better because of the problem of legacy support calls, right? The whole idea of calling support has always been a bit of a nightmare, right? You spend so much time wasting, or you waste so much time on these calls, just passing data back and forth, going through tiers of support, right? So I think vendors came out and said, we want to solve this for our customers, right? And the way we do that is by gathering better data, analyzing it, running some machine learning algorithms against it to find problems, identify them, and address them, and all without you having to do any of it. So we kind of see that as a table stakes thing now, right? Like every storage platform you invest in should have that. It's highly valued, and it's going to make your job easier.
Dustin, sadly, I think VMware still uses the top support model.
Oh, really?
That's my opinion.
That's disappointing. Well, so like we said though, right? This thing should be automatically happening, right? And it's not happening. If it is happening, right, it feels like you have another storage guy on your team gathering all this data and giving you this access to this powerful tool that you didn't have before. So we see it as a strong component of data services, probably why HCI doesn't gain as much in that space. So while talking about make our lives easier, one other area that we hold in high value is the supportability of the platform. So, we just talked about it, right? The ability to support your storage platform, making your life easier, the things that you don't want to deal with, right? So knowing that the person you're going to call has full stack analytics into your environment, can see all this data, can access it. It just makes them better. It makes you spend less time talking to them. Maybe you don't have to talk to them at all because they proactively already solved your problem, right? So having that is critical, right? And knowing where your support team comes from, right? So are they dedicated to you, or are they dedicated to 100 other products, and you may get lucky to get a hold of them? Or are you going to go through 3 or 4 tiers of support, right? Some of them you can get to a tier 3 engineer right away. Some you cannot. So think about those things. And we like to think about those things because we don't want to hand you a product that, one, makes the support's not good enough and it makes our jobs harder, but also we don't want to hand you a product that makes your job harder either. So we all win if we have a good supportability around our products. So we focus very heavily on that. And really, at the end of the day, you really just want to treat storage like a utility, right? Like I have water in my home. I don't necessarily want to be a plumber. or a water treatment facility, right? I want someone else to handle that for me. And that's kind of how we view storage and data services, right? Those things should just work, and they should provide value and not cause pain or stress or anything to you. So now Brian's going to talk about my favorite section of this, the Mystery Sand Showdown. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, no pressure, Dustin. So we want to kind of drive home some of these products. So what we did is we took two actual products that Eagle can technically sell. Eagle actually owns both of these products, and we've had them in our labs for greater than 6 months. So I didn't want to reveal their real names because I didn't want to disparage them. But next time I have a happy hour with any of you fine folks, I'd be happy to tell you who they are. Mark, I'm talking to you if Steve ever schedules it. But so on the left, we've got the Bismarck E5000 by ABC, and on the right, we've got the Techno 6000 by Dilbert. So what's interesting here is, this is what I call the RFP view, or the checkbox view, and it's why I always said I wanted to buy the last product that was presented to me, because at a high level, everyone's gotten very good at claiming they do everything. But what happens is when you actually go through the due diligence, you get the product in-house, you kind of learn a little bit more about it. So to drive that home, we wanted to use the highly scientific rating scale that was created by Rotten Tomatoes. So that's what we've got here. So I'll move through some of these. I won't try to spin forever here, but you look at snapshots. They're both pretty capable. Maybe one's better, not enough to convince me to buy it over the other. As it relates to dedupe, once again, one's maybe a little bit better, but I still don't see huge differences here. What about the data reduction guarantee? Well, I'm going to give every vendor a big splat there. We don't talk about data reduction guarantees from our vendors at Eagle, because if you look at the T's and C's, not only are they dishonest about what it is, what data reduction is, it should be your compression ratio times your deduplication ratio. They'll add in thin provisioning, all this other stuff that's not real. But then they also have all these T's and C's that basically prevent them from paying out and make you an unhappy customer. So typically in Greenfield, Eagle sizes at 2 to 1, and we have to spend a lot of time explaining why all of our competitors are claiming they can pull off the same thing with half the storage, right? I'd rather you not be mad at me lately. I'd rather you answer the phone when I call. So we approach it a little bit differently. Replication, maybe you don't need fully synchronous rep, but it's cool that the Bismarck E has that built in. Similarly with the Metro cluster, it's cool that it's built in. You need to buy a third-party appliance for the Dilbert Techno. Keep in mind that they still check that box that they claim they can do that. That's also an example of complexity that you probably don't need to introduce. So we love talking about when that's a good fit. Encryption, I hate self-encrypting disks, which the Dilbert Techno uses to gain that check marks. It's a quick fix. The encryption is not in flight during replication. What they should have done is actually do some real software development, push that responsibility to the CPU. It's got custom instructions for it, build in a KMS, turn it on at install day, and it just works, right? So it's nice that the Bismarck Key has that. When it comes to analytics and machine learning, everyone claims that they do this, but there are companies out there that started doing this over a decade ago and excel at it. And there's companies that show you your IOPS and block size, right? And almost everyone claims machine learning, but I can go into some portals and actually show you where they are taking all of the data they're pulling in, they're extracting value out of it, and they're being proactive. Then I've got other products that claim they do it, but I can't find any evidence. Similarly with NVMe, everyone likes to claim they do end-to-end NVMe. Some claim that they have storage class memory built into the product. Maybe it's optional. This is actually where the Dilbert Techno excels. It actually has it built in, but then it falls flat on its face because it uses 12 gig SAS for expansion enclosures. Well, that's like taking a 1,000-lane highway and going down to 10 lanes, right, just for a mile or two. Doesn't make any sense. It's a product that was rushed to market. Similarly on scale out, they both do 4 nodes, but there's asterisks all over the other one because only certain services don't scale out. And then finally on cloud connectivity, it's another example where one company will claim that they do it, but you have to buy a third-party app, provision it separately, and now you're losing that native data reduction, that native encryption, all of that visibility. And so it really does matter, right? So, the takeaway from a lot of what we've talked about so far is that vendors get a splat because they use marketing and buzzwords to hide their flaws and make themselves look appealing. This puts you at a disadvantage because you have to go way beyond that first Presentation. Eagle gets a tomato because we spend a ton of time vetting and testing products. And, selfishly, that helps us because we can articulate why our products we feel are the best. But ultimately, the customer's the win. They're certified fresh, right? You guys get to save time and money. And, business outcomes do matter. It's just that a lot of vendors like to use outcomes to avoid talking about architecture.